Admiral Kedvar stood on the bridge of the Celestial Dominion, watching the blue-green world rotate slowly beneath his fleet. The planet looked peaceful from orbit, its cities glowing like scattered jewels across 3 continents. Intelligence reports indicated a human colony, established barely 50 years ago, with a population of 2 million. Standard protocol for the Zephyrian Confederation was simple: demand surrender, demonstrate superior firepower, accept compliance. Scanning complete, Admiral reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Velna. Her crystalline headset pulsed with soft amber light as data streamed directly into her consciousness. 67 major population centers, minimal orbital defenses. We detect no significant military installations. Kethvar nodded, his blue-scale face reflecting satisfaction. In his 3 decades of service, he had overseen the peaceful integration of 47 worlds into the Confederation. The process was always the same: show overwhelming force, offer reasonable terms, and most species chose survival over futile resistance. Humans were newcomers to this sector, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. They would understand the mathematics of power. Open communications to the planetary government, he ordered. The main display shimmered, revealing a middle-aged human woman seated behind a simple metal desk. Her brown hair was pulled back severely, and her dark eyes held no trace of fear. Behind her, Kethvar could see what appeared to be a concrete bunker rather than an elegant governmental chamber. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Confederation 4th Fleet," he began, his translator rendering his words into the human language. "You have 7 days to consider integration into our confederation. We offer protection, advanced technology, and peaceful coexistence in exchange for accepting our governance structure." The human woman leaned forward slightly. "I'm Director Sarah Chun of the New Geneva Colony Council. We appreciate your offer, Admiral, but will have to decline." Kethvar felt a flicker of surprise. Most species at least asked about terms, negotiated details, requested time to debate among their leadership. This flat refusal was unusual, but not unprecedented. "Director Chun, perhaps you don't understand the situation. We have 200 vessels in orbit. Your world has no significant defenses. This doesn't need to end in unnecessary loss of life." "You're right, Admiral. It doesn't." Chen's expression remained completely calm. "We're transmitting our response now." The communication ended abruptly. Kethvar stared at the blank screen, then turned to his sensor operator. "Report. What do they transmit?" "Scanning now, sir. It appears to be coordinates." "Coordinates to what?" Before the sensor operator could respond, every alarm on the bridge began shrieking simultaneously. The main display erupted with red warning indicators as something massive registered on their long-range sensors. "Contact bearing 047 Mark 18, shouted Lieutenant Velna. "Admiral, it's enormous. Mass signature indicates a vessel at least 3 times larger than our flagship." Kethvar felt his blood turn cold. Intelligence had indicated no human military presence in this sector. Where had such a massive vessel come from? Visual contact. The main screen shifted to display deep space. At first, Kethvar saw nothing but stars. Then something moved in the darkness, and his breath caught in his throat. The ship emerging from hyperspace looked nothing like any vessel in the Confederation databases. Where Zephyrin ships were elegant curves of crystalline beauty, this thing was angular brutality made manifest. Its hull was flat black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Strange protrusions jutted out at irregular intervals, giving it the appearance of some deep space predator designed by Nightmare. "Size estimate?" Kethvar's voice came out as a whisper. 12 kilometers long, Admiral. For kilometers at the widest point. Mass indicates extremely heavy armor and internal structure. The human vessel hung motionless in space, its surface completely dark except for a few small lights that might have been sensor arrays. It made no attempt to communicate, issued no demands, transmitted no warnings. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a narrow beam transmission from the planet." "Put it through." Director Chen appeared on screen again, still seated in her concrete bunker. This time, she was smiling. Admiral Kefvar, I'd like you to meet the UES Retribution. She's our newest Dreadnought-class warship, commissioned just last month. The coordinates we sent were her rally point. Kefvar stared at the massive vessel on his tactical display. Director Chen, we outnumber your single ship 200 to 1. Surely you don't intend to fight the entire Fourth Fleet with one vessel, regardless of its size. Chen's smile widened. Oh, Admiral, you misunderstand. The Retribution isn't here to fight your fleet. Then what? She's here to demonstrate why you should leave while you still can. Chen leaned back in her chair. You see, Admiral, humans have a different philosophy about warfare than most species. We don't believe in proportional response. We believe in overwhelming, absolute, and final solutions to threats against our people. The lights on the bridge flickered as the ship's power systems fluctuated. Every Zephyrin officer turned to stare at their instruments, confusion and growing alarm written across their features. Sir, the sensor operator called out, his voice tight with fear. The human vessel is powering up weapon systems. Energy readings they're off our scales, Admiral. I've never seen anything like this. Kefvar looked back at Director Chun, and for the first time in his long military career, he felt the cold touch of genuine fear. What are you planning to do? Chen's expression never changed. We're going to show you what human warships are designed for, Admiral. We're going to show you why the galaxy should fear us. The Retribution began to move. It wasn't the graceful acceleration of Zephyrin vessels, with their crystalline drives that bent space itself. This was something else entirely. Raw, brutal force that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. The massive human warship rotated slowly, bringing its weapons to bear, and Admiral Kefvar could see details that made his skin crawl. The hull wasn't smooth metal, as he'd first thought. It was covering what looked like scales or overlapping plates, each one inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Strange appendages extended from the ship's sides like the arms of some cosmic predator, and along its length ran channels that glowed with sickly red light. Admiral, Lieutenant Velna's voice was barely steady. I'm reading massive energy buildups across the human vessel. Multiple weapon systems are coming online. Sir, the power output it's impossible. Nothing should be able to generate that much energy without tearing itself apart. Kefvar activated his command channel to address the entire fleet. All vessels, maintain position but charge defensive systems. Do not engage unless fired upon. He turned back to the communication screen, where Director Chun waited patiently. Director, whatever you're planning, consider the consequences. The Confederation has treaties with dozens of species. An attack on our fleet would bring the combined might of half the galaxy down on your colonies. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. You know, Admiral, that's exactly what we hoped you'd say. It tells us everything we need to know about how the galaxy conducts warfare. She leaned forward. You fight with rules. Treaties. Proportional responses. Civilized limitations. The red glow along the Retribution's hull was intensifying, pulsing like a heartbeat. Humans don't fight wars, Admiral. We fight extinction events. Before Kefvar could respond, his tactical officer screamed. Not shouted, screamed, with the primal terror of a prey animal facing something beyond comprehension. Sir, the human ship, it's targeting Kepler Station. Kefvar spun to face the tactical display. Kepler Station was a Confederation research facility in the outer system, home to 3,000 scientists and their families. It was completely undefended, purely civilian, and according to every rule of civilized warfare, absolutely off limits as a target. They wouldn't dare, he whispered. Admiral. Director Chen's voice cut through the bridge chatter. You need to understand something about human military doctrine. We don't target your soldiers first. We target what you value most. The Retribution fired. What emerged from a human warship wasn't energy beams or plasma bolts or any other recognizable weapon. It looked like a writhing mass of living darkness, something that bent light around itself and seemed to scream as it moved through space. The projectile, if it could be called that, covered the distance to Kepler Station in seconds. The station didn't explode. It didn't break apart or burn. It simply ceased to exist, as if reality had decided it never belonged there in the first place. 3,000 lives snuffed out without so much as a flash of light. Absolute silence filled the bridge of the Celestial Dominion. Every officer, every crew member, every living being stared at the empty space where the station had been moments before. That was a demonstration, Director Chin said calmly. The Retribution carries 360 similar projectiles. Our targeting computers have already locked onto every Confederation facility within 100 light years. Military bases, civilian colonies, research stations, even your beautiful crystal gardens on Zephyr Prime. Kefvar felt something break inside his mind. The casual mention of their homeworld's most sacred sites, the complete dismissal of civilian protection protocols, the absolute ruthlessness of the attack. It went against everything he understood about how intelligent species conducted themselves. "You're monsters," he breathed. "No, Admiral. We're humans, and the galaxy is about to learn the difference." The communications officer suddenly looked up from his station, his face pale with shock. "Sir, we're receiving emergency transmissions from across the sector. Confederation Command, civilian governments, even neutral species. They're all asking the same thing. What just happened to Kepler Station?" Chin smiled again, and it was the most terrifying expression Kefvar had ever seen. By now, every major power in the galaxy has detected that weapon discharge. They're all watching, Admiral, waiting to see what happens next. "What do you want?" Kefvar's voice cracked. "We want you to leave. All of you. Forever. We want you to go back to your crystal palaces and your civilized wars and your proportional responses, and we want you to remember what you saw here today. We want you to tell every species you meet that there are now humans in this galaxy and that we play by different rules." The sensor operator's voice was barely a whisper. "Admiral, I'm detecting movement throughout the system. More human vessels are decloaking. Dozens of them." The tactical display updated, showing ship after ship appearing as if materializing from empty space. Each one was different. Some sleek and predatory, others massive and brutal, all of them radiating the same wrongness as the Retribution. They formed a perfect sphere around the Confederation fleet, close enough that their weapons could annihilate every Zephyrin vessel before anyone could react. "How long have they been there?" Kefvar asked. "Based on the sensor signatures, sir, they've been watching us since we arrived." Director Chin stood up from her chair, and Kefvar could see she was wearing what looked like military fatigues rather than civilian clothing. "Admiral, you have 1 hour to leave the system. Take your fleet and go. If any Confederation vessel is still in our space after that deadline, we'll consider it an act of war. And if it is war..." Chen's smile vanished, replaced by an expression of such cold determination that Kefvar physically recoiled. "Then you'll discover what human beings are really capable of, Admiral. And I promise you, your precious Confederation won't survive the education." Admiral Kefvar stood frozen on his bridge, surrounded by the whispered prayers of his crew. The tactical display showed the human fleet in perfect formation around them. 67 vessels of varying sizes, all maintaining absolute radio silence. The Retribution hung directly ahead like a massive predator, its red channels pulsing with barely contained energy. "Sir," Lieutenant Velna approached cautiously. "Confederation Command is requesting immediate status report. High Command wants to know if we need reinforcements." The thought of more Confederation vessels entering this nightmare made Kefvar's stomach turn. He'd seen what one human weapon could do to Kepler Station. The idea of escalating the situation terrified him more than retreat. "Tell them." He paused, looking at the empty space where 3,000 beings had lived moments ago. "Tell them we're conducting negotiations and will report when complete." "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "I'm receiving a narrow beam transmission from one of the human vessels. It's not from the planet this time." "Put it through." The display flickered, revealing a different human face. This one was male, older, with scars across his cheek and gray threading through his black hair. He wore a military uniform unlike anything in Confederation databases. Dark fabric with no visible rank insignia, designed for function rather than ceremony. "Admiral Kefvar, I'm Captain Marcus Webb of the UES Retribution. Director Chen asked me to give you a more detailed explanation of your situation. Kethvar found his voice. Captain Webb, that weapon you used violated every convention of civilized warfare. Targeting civilian populations is a war crime by any standard. Webb's expression didn't change. Admiral, let me explain something about human history. We've been at war with ourselves for our entire existence. We perfected killing in ways your species can't imagine. We've built weapons that could sterilize entire worlds, created diseases that could wipe out whole populations, developed strategies that would make your worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. The captain leaned forward slightly. The weapon that destroyed Kepler Station? That's not even close to our most destructive capability. It's what we consider a precision instrument. Then why use it at all? Because you needed to understand what you're dealing with, Admiral. Your species fights wars like a chess game. Measured moves, calculated losses, acceptable casualties. You fight to achieve political objectives within acceptable parameters. Webb's scarred face grew hard. Humans fight wars to end them. Permanently. When we go to war, we don't seek victory. We seek the complete elimination of our enemy's ability to threaten us ever again. Lieutenant Velnas stepped closer to Kethvar's chair. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from deep space. Long-range sensors show more human vessels approaching from multiple vectors. The tactical display updated again. New contact appeared at the edge of the system. Larger vessels, moving in perfect formation. As they drew closer, their details became visible, and collective gasps echoed across the bridge. These weren't warships in any recognizable sense. They looked like mobile space stations, kilometers of angular architecture, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Each one dwarfed the Retribution, and there were dozens of them approaching from different directions. Captain Webb, Kethvar's voice was barely steady. Were those vessels? Those are extinction-class dreadnoughts, Admiral. Each one carries enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. They're not designed to fight fleets. They're designed to eliminate entire star systems. The sensor operator's voice cracked. Sir, I'm reading weapon signatures unlike anything in our databases. Some of these vessels are showing energy outputs comparable to stellar phenomena. Webb nodded grimly. The Retribution was built for surgical strikes against fleets and stations. Those ships were built for something else entirely. They're what we send when we decide a species is too dangerous to exist. You're talking about genocide. No, Admiral. Genocide is what happens to populations. What we're talking about is extinction, the complete removal of a threat from a universe. We don't do it often, but when we do, we make sure it only needs to happen once. Director Chen's voice came through the communication system. Admiral, you now have 47 minutes to leave the system. Our deep space assets are in position. Kethvar looked around his bridge at faces filled with terror. These were veteran officers who had served in dozens of campaigns, faced hostile fleets and dangerous phenomena, but they had never encountered anything like this level of casual, overwhelming threat. Captain Webb, surely there's some way to resolve this diplomatically. The Confederation could offer trade agreements, technology exchanges, mutual defense pacts. Webb actually smiled, but it held no warmth. Admiral, do you know what humans call a mutual defense pact with more powerful species? A protection racket. Do you know what we call technology exchanges with species that might use that technology against us? Arming our enemies. The massive dreadnoughts continued their approach, and with each passing minute, the sensor readings became more impossible to believe. Weapons that bent space-time itself, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, drives that seemed to operate outside known physics. How? Kethvar whispered. How did your species develop such devastating technology? Webb's expression grew distant. Because we had to, Admiral. See, humans don't just fight external enemies. We fight ourselves. For thousands of years, we've been developing better ways to kill other humans. Every war taught us new lessons about destruction, new methods of causing death, new strategies for ending conflicts permanently. He gestured toward the display, showing the approaching dreadnoughts. These ships weren't designed to fight aliens, Admiral. They were designed to fight other humans. Species who understood our psychology, our tactics, our capabilities. The fact that we're now pointing them at you should tell you exactly how seriously we take threats to our colonies. 35 minutes, Admiral. Director Chen's voice announced. Kefvar closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command crushing down on him. His fleet represented the pinnacle of Confederation military power. 200 vessels crewed by the finest officers from dozens of species, equipped with weapons and shields that had conquered half the galaxy, and they were completely, utterly helpless against what they faced. All vessels, he announced on the fleet communication channel, prepare for immediate departure from the system. The retreat began in absolute silence. One by one, the ships of the Confederation 4 Fleet activated their drives and began the slow process of disengaging from their positions. Admiral Kefvar watched the tactical display as his proud vessels, each one a marvel of crystalline engineering, formed up into departure formation under the watchful eyes of the human fleet. Admiral, Lieutenant Velnar reported quietly, the human vessels are maintaining their positions but not interfering with our withdrawal. However, sir, she paused, her voice trembling slightly. They're conducting active targeting scans on every ship in our fleet. Kefvar could feel the weight of those scans like physical pressure. Each human vessel was painting his ships with sensor beams, calculating firing solutions, measuring distances and angles with mechanical precision. The message was clear. We could destroy you all at any moment, and we want you to know it. Sir, the communications officer called out, priority transmission from Confederation High Command. Kefvar closed his eyes briefly. He'd been dreading this moment. Put it through. Command channel only. The display shifted to show Grand Admiral Thexera, the supreme commander of all Confederation forces. Her crystalline crown of office reflected the lights of the High Command Chamber, and her ancient eyes held the wisdom of 3 centuries of military service. Admiral Kefvar, we've been monitoring the situation from long-range sensors. Explain to me how a single human colony managed to produce a fleet capable of threatening your entire force. Before Kefvar could respond, Captain Webb's voice cut through communication. Grand Admiral, I hope you don't mind the interruption. Your communication isn't as secure as you think it is. The display split, showing both Thexera's shocked face and Webb's calm expression. Behind the human captain, Kefvar could see the bridge of the Retribution, a place of harsh lighting and brutal efficiency, where humans move with predatory grace between stations that look more like weapons and control systems. How are you accessing our command frequencies? Thexera demanded. Grand Admiral, we've been monitoring all Confederation communications since your fleet entered our space. Your encryption is adequate for dealing with species at your technological level. Webb gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display on Kefvar's bridge updated with impossible information, not just the positions of human vessels in the system, but detailed schematics of every Confederation ship, complete technical specifications, crew manifests, even personal files on key officers. We know everything about your fleet, Grand Admiral. Ship capabilities, crew psychology, command structure, supply requirements, tactical doctrines. We've been inside your computer system since Admiral Kefvar arrived. Thexera's composure cracked slightly. That's impossible. Our systems are isolated, quantum encrypted, protected by technology designed to protect against other Confederation-level species. Grand Admiral, let me ask you something. In your 3 centuries of military service, how many times have you fought an enemy that was technologically superior to the Confederation? Silence stretched across the communication channel. Never, Webb continued. You've conquered primitive species, absorbed civilizations at your level or below, negotiated with equals. You have no experience fighting an enemy that views your best technology as laughably obsolete. The human captain touched something on a control panel, and every system on Kefvar's ship flickered momentarily. Life support, navigation, weapons, shields, everything went offline for exactly 3 seconds before returning to normal. That was a demonstration. Grand Admiral, we now have complete control over every system on every ship in Admiral Kefvar's fleet. We could disable them all, destroy them all, or simply leave them drifting in space to contemplate their situation. What do you want? Thexera's voice was barely controlled. We want you to understand your new position in the galaxy. Director Chen's voice joined the conversation. The Confederation has been the dominant power for 3 centuries because you were the most advanced species in known space. That just changed. Webb leaned back in his chair. Grand Admiral, how many species has the Confederation absorbed through the threat of military force? We offer voluntary integration. We don't conquer. You offer the choice between integration and destruction. You present overwhelming force and give species the option to join you or be eliminated. It's a very effective strategy against primitives. The human captain's expression grew cold. But it only works when you're the strongest force in the equation. What happens when a species appears that can offer you the same choice? Kethvar watched Thexera's face cycle through emotions he'd never seen from her before. Confusion, fear, rage, and finally, terrible understanding. You're threatening the entire Confederation. No, Grand Admiral. We're informing the Confederation of the new reality. Humanity is expanding into this galaxy. We'll establish colonies, build fleets, and defend our interests. The question is whether the Confederation wants to coexist peacefully or learn what human warfare really looks like. You can't threaten hundreds of worlds with a few dozen ships. Webb smiled, and Kethvar felt ice in his veins. Grand Admiral, these aren't our only ships. This isn't even our only fleet. What you're seeing here is a single battle group from our Frontier Defense Command. The display updated again, showing sensor readings from across the galaxy. Dozens of systems, hundreds of contacts, human vessels emerging from the darkness between stars like predators awakening from hibernation. We've been watching Confederation for 50 years. Grand Admiral, learning your strengths, cataloging your weaknesses, preparing for this moment. We know the location of every major world, every strategic resource, every key military installation. Director Chen's voice grew harder. We've been preparing for war with you since the moment we realized you existed. The only question was whether we'd need to fight that war or if you'd be intelligent enough to avoid it. 20 minutes until deadline, announced a mechanical voice from a human fleet. Thexera looked directly at Kethvar. Admiral, complete your withdrawal immediately. All ships, emergency hyperspace departure, as soon as you clear the gravity well. Acknowledge, Grand Admiral. As the Confederation fleet accelerated toward the system's edge, Kethvar took one last look at the human vessels. They hung in space like sleeping predators, patient and deadly, their dark hulls reflecting nothing while their weapons tracked every movement of the retreating fleet. Admiral, Captain Webb said quietly, make sure your Grand Admiral understands something. This was the peaceful first contact between our species. If we meet again under hostile circumstances, the outcome will be very different. The communication ended, leaving Kethvar alone with his terrified crew and the knowledge that everything had changed forever. The emergency session of the Confederation High Council convened 12 hours after Admiral Kethvar's fleet limped back to Zephyr Prime. Representatives from 47 member species filled the great crystal chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperate debate. Grand Admiral Thexera stood at the center podium, her ancient features marked by exhaustion and something none of them had ever seen before, defeat. The tactical recordings speak for themselves, she announced, her voice carrying across the chamber. The humans possess military technology decades, possibly centuries ahead of our own. Their weapons operate on principles we don't understand. Their ships demonstrate capabilities that shouldn't be possible. Ambassador Krell TH of the Silicon Collective raised his crystalline form from his seat. Grand Admiral, surely you're exaggerating. No species could advance so rapidly. 50 years ago, these humans had barely achieved interstellar flight. Thexera activated the chamber's holographic display. The image of Kepler Station appeared. 3 rings of metal and crystal spinning slowly in space, home to thousands of researchers and their families. Then came the recording of its destruction, the writhing darkness that emerged from the human ship, the complete annihilation of matter and energy, the absolute silence where life had existed moments before. The chamber fell silent. This weapon operates outside all known physics, Thexera continued. Our scientists have been analyzing the sensor data for hours. The projectile appears to have erased the station from reality itself. Not destroyed it, not disintegrated it, but removed it from existence as if it had never been there. Ambassador Velkan of the Hegemony Worlds leaned forward. What about their fleet strength? Surely they can't have many vessels of this capability. The display updated, showing the human ships that had appeared throughout the system. The massive dreadnoughts, the sleek destroyers, the predatory cruisers, all bearing the same wrong angles and impossible technology. Conservative estimates suggest at least 300 human warships in this sector alone, Thexera reported. Long-range sensors detected similar fleets in 17 other systems, and these appear to be just their frontier forces. A wave of terrified murmurs swept through the chamber. Representative after representative stood to voice the same desperate questions. How had humanity advanced so quickly? Why had their intelligence networks failed to detect this buildup? What did the humans want? Perhaps most disturbing, Thexera continued, is their complete psychological profile. These beings don't think like any species we've encountered. They don't fight for territory or resources or political advantage. They fight for extinction, the complete elimination of threats. She activated another recording, showing Captain Webb's scarred face and cold eyes. Listen to how casually he discusses planetary annihilation, how matter-of-factly he describes weapons designed to eliminate entire species. This isn't posturing or intimidation. This is their actual military doctrine. Ambassador Zethar of the Outer Colonies stood trembling. Grand Admiral, what are our options? Can we negotiate? Offer them territory, resources, anything they want? They don't want anything from us. Thexera replied grimly. They want us to leave them alone. They want us to understand that the galaxy has new apex predators, and we're no longer at the top of the food chain. The chamber erupted in debates, arguments, and desperate proposals. Some called for immediate military mobilization, others for diplomatic overtures, still others for complete withdrawal from human space. Through it all, Grand Admiral Thexera stood silent, watching species that had conquered worlds and subjugated civilizations reduced to terrified children by the reality of facing a superior force. Finally, the eldest member of the council, Ancient Mordak of the First Worlds, raised his hand for silence. His voice, barely a whisper after 8 centuries of life, carried absolute authority. Grand Admiral, what is your professional military assessment of a conflict with this human species? Thexera looked around the chamber at faces filled with desperate hope that she might offer some strategy, some possibility of victory. She crushed that hope with mathematical precision. Total annihilation of the Confederation within 6 months, possibly sooner. The silence that followed was absolute. Their technology advantage is insurmountable, she continued. Their psychological approach to warfare makes negotiation impossible. Their fleet strength appears to exceed our own, and they've had decades to study our capabilities while remaining hidden. They know everything about us. We know almost nothing about them. Ancient Mordak nodded slowly. Then we have learned what every apex species eventually learns, that there's always something stronger waiting in the darkness. He stood with the careful dignity of extreme age. I propose immediate implementation of the Preservation Protocol. All Confederation forces will withdraw from human space. All contact with human colonies will cease. We will establish buffer zones and ensure that no Confederation vessel or citizen enters human territory without explicit permission. You're talking about surrender, Ambassador Krell-TH protested. I'm talking about survival, Mordak replied. For 3 centuries, the Confederation has offered other species a simple choice: join us or face extinction. Now we face the same choice ourselves. One by one, the representatives voted. The measure passed unanimously. As the session ended and delegates filed out in stunned silence, Admiral Kethvar approached Grand Admiral Thexera. His uniform still bore the stains of stress sweat from those terrible hours in human space. Grand Admiral, there's something else. Before we left, Captain Webb gave me a message of counsel. Thexera looked at him with exhausted eyes. What message? He said to tell you that humanity appreciates the Confederation's decision to coexist peacefully. He said they hope our species can have a long and mutually respectful relationship. That sounds almost conciliatory. Kethvar shook his head. No, ma'am. It was a warning. He was telling us that they'll allow us to continue existing as long as we remember our place in the new order. As the two officers stood in the empty chamber, surrounded by the crystal architecture that had symbolized Confederation power for centuries, both understood that everything had changed. The galaxy had new rulers, and they had chosen to let their former rivals live. For now, in the depths of space, human warships continued their patrols along invisible borders, their crews monitoring communications and calculating firing solutions. The galaxy watched and learned to fear the darkness between stars, where humanity waited with patient, predatory intelligence. The age of human supremacy had begun not with conquest, but with a single, terrifying demonstration of what conquest would mean. And in species after species, the same whispered word spread through military commands and government chambers. Thank the void they chose mercy.